Okay, great. Today is our first Faculty Friday, and my name is Pam Boffman. I'm the Associate Dean and Director of Admission at Center College, and I am a Center alum as well as a Center parent. I have a son who just graduated from Center and another son who is a rising sophomore. So had the bookends last year to learn a lot about what our upper class students are doing, at the same time what our new students are doing, and that's been really insightful and rewarding to be a Center parent. I am joined today by Dr. Jennifer Goetz, and let's see, I think we have another participant joining us, so that's fantastic. Dr. Goetz is a beloved faculty member on campus, and I'm delighted to chat with her. In our realm, we often don't get to interact as much and to casually chat, so I'm delighted today to have the chance to learn more about Dr. Goetz's role and sort of how she views her center experience. So can we get started with you offering a sort of a short introduction about maybe where you're from, your schooling, what your roles are here?
Sure. I'll try to make it fast. It was a little circuitous on how I got here. So I am from the East Coast, grew up in New Jersey. When I was a kid, I was very interested in science. And also I was kind of like, well, a girl in science, that's pretty rare. I want to do that. So I applied to school and went to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, which is a really famous, actually, engineering school. And I started in engineering. This is always good for other students to hear, that you don't need to know what you want to do when you start. I started in engineering, did it for 2 years, did not enjoy it. Ended up having to take some classes over the summer in order to switch to another major. And I ended up becoming an information science major, which is kind of a weird conglomeration of psychology and computer science. And so I did that, and then I don't know how far to go into the details. Anyway, took a detour to the Peace Corps after undergrad, and spent 2 years in West Africa. Then came back and decided I wanted to study psychology. So I went to grad school at the University of California in Berkeley. Yeah, I study cultural and social psychology. So that's a very particular type of psychology where we just study kind of everyday life and how situations and the societies around us shape what we think. And then after grad school, I went to Middlebury College for 3 years and taught there. And now I'm at Center, and I've been here since 2011. Yeah, so that was the first part of your question. What was the second part?
Your sort of the roles that you have here.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so I'm a psychology professor. I was, for the last 3 years, the chair of the psychology program. Someone else is taking that on now, but that I still know a lot and can help people a lot in understanding psychology. I'm going to be the new Posse, I think it's 15 mentors. So we have a group of Posse scholars coming in the fall, and I'm excited to be their mentor. Yeah, I'm really interested on campus in inclusivity issues in particular. So actually this last year I served as the Diversity and Inclusivity Fellow, which means I did special projects with other faculty. Particularly I focused in the sciences. So I led a faculty community where we read and learned about issues in the sciences. Why are students, underrepresented students in the sciences, why do they have the experiences they do? How do we as faculty contribute to that? How can we as faculty learn and get better at supporting all of our students? Maybe first generation students or non-white students, students of color. How can we do a better job of helping them thrive in our classes? That's a lot of what I did. So.
Great. As you reflect back, can you pinpoint the moment when you had that aha moment, perhaps, about when you knew you wanted to be a college professor?
Ooh. I don't know if it was an aha. I think it was a little more gradual. I actually, when I decided to go to grad school, I did not necessarily want to be a professor. It's more that I really enjoy the topics I study. I think psychology is fascinating. I think culture is fascinating. So obviously, I went from being in the Peace Corps and living in another culture, and I was really drawn into this idea of why is it that I grew up in New Jersey and have certain values, and other people grew up in Niger, West Africa, and they have a completely different set of, well, not completely different, but a very different set of values. And so I got really into that idea of how far in does culture go, I guess, how far into our heads. And so I just really wanted to study that. When I decided to become a teacher more, I think that happened way more towards the end of my grad school process. I enjoy research, but I didn't want to spend my whole day with a computer, because that's what you do when you become a researcher, at a major research institution like Berkeley. You mostly spend your time doing statistics and collecting data. And I really wanted to continue to have that interaction with people, and teaching allows me that. But there wasn't an aha moment. In fact, my first teaching experience was really terrible. I taught an introductory psychology class at Berkeley as a upper level grad student. I think I had 250 or 300 students, and the very first day the computer didn't work, so I couldn't do my lecture.
Oh.
So it's gotten better since then.
In the world of Zoom now, where everybody's worried they're going to have those moments, I feel your pain and your anxiety from that moment. So if I have this right, you teach a lot of upper level psychology classes here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite course you teach? And if so, why?
It's hard to pick a favorite. I do really enjoy cultural psychology. I'm teaching that in the fall. But it's going to sound weird. I think my favorite is actually research methods, which students would definitely not say is their favorite because it's required and it has statistics and they get kind of scared of it. But I think what I actually enjoy about it is that they think it's gonna be terrible and it's actually super interesting.
Okay.
So the way I organize it is that students get into groups and they design their own research projects as a group. And so we've had fascinating, every time I teach that class, it's different. So the material I'm teaching is the same, like statistics and how to run an experiment. But the topics the students choose each semester change so much. And they're usually around current events. So actually, before we all got sent home, I had a group of students studying the media around coronavirus and how it was affecting prejudice against Asian American students and Asian students, particularly at Center. I mean, they were interested in the culture at large, but they were going to study it at Center. So that's why I love it, is I get to see the students come up with something new. I get to see them enjoy something that they thought they would hate. And I get to engage with current events. So a lot of my students study things like that. They study prejudice, they study relationships, adjustment to college and all kinds of, I had a really great project a few years ago looking at social media and how, whether posting an event that you participated in, if you posted that to social media, it actually made them enjoy the event more, which was funky. So it's just, I guess that's what that class is so great. Plus that class really fits my style of teaching, which is super, super activity oriented. I do not like lecturing, although I sometimes have to do it. If I can, I'd rather have more activities and problem solving and taking the material that we're learning and applying it to our world. And that class, I mean, I lecture maybe, 20% of the time in that class, and the rest is all much more interactive. And I really love that about it.
This is a nice segue to the next question on my mind. I know that you have mentored a number of students in collaborative research. Mm-hmm. And can you explain a little bit more about the dynamic and maybe the process of getting that established and how you execute that?
Yeah, sure. So in psychology, and a lot of the other sciences have this too, but psychology and behavioral neuroscience at Center have had this program for, I think, 20 years, where students can enroll in a class and get course credit for conducting sort of mentored or independent research with a professor. The way that works essentially you're in a research lab. So we all are active in research. We all have our interests. You know, I'm interested in culture and prejudice, and I have other colleagues who are interested in like law, psychology, or meditation or things like that. And so the way that works from the student end is once they take a couple research methods classes and have the basic skill set kind of, in their toolkit, then they can apply to work with a professor. And professors usually in a given year have about 4 to 6, it depends, slots in their lab. And then students sign up for the class, and then it's unlike any other class you've taken, right? So the only really structured part is they meet with me for an hour as a team. As a team, we set goals on what it is we want to accomplish. And then they go and do their thing and have to schedule their own time, accomplish their own goals. And if they run into problems, problem solve either with each other or reach out to me. And then we meet again the following week. So in that work, I've had students do totally different projects. So we just last year designed an intervention as a group. We all did this together. We designed an intervention to get people to care about implicit bias. So I don't know if you've heard about implicit bias. It's kind of in the news a lot right now. And it's kind of these unconscious, usually racial biases that people have that they kind of absorb from society around them. And even if we believe and want to treat people equally, we have this in us. So we were trying to figure out how can we educate people on that and get them to care about it. So my students did that. They designed the entire project kind of with me coaching them, and then started collecting data. Unfortunately, it got cut off by COVID, and we couldn't finish our data collection. But so I think the way it looks from a student perspective is, intense meetings with me and 3 other students maybe, which is just a mentoring opportunity that I think is fantastic. And what I've had is I've had students sign up for that class sort of as part of the requirement, and then continue and continue and continue. So they might start it as a sophomore or a junior, and I'll have them through to their senior year, and they are doing it as an elective. And I would say that most, not all, but most of the closest relationships I have with students have come out of that. And I have students that Pam, Alyssa, Christopher, and some others who came through here that I still keep in touch with. And they're still calling me for career advice or letters of rec or whatever. I've had a lot of students come through, and we build a connection and a level of trust, and I have a level of understanding about their skill sets that although Center has really small classes, this is a whole nother level.
Sure.
Does that answer your question a little?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And I think that ties into sort of maybe a general advising notion. So, as you well know, students aren't declaring majors and minors until spring of the sophomore year. We get a lot of questions about how do we help students arrive at that point. We do at Center a fair amount of formal advising, but also informal advising. How do you as a professor bring the first year student along in that capacity? Have you been a first year advisor as well as major minor advisor? What would you share about sort of your duties, your roles, or your goals as an advisor?
Sure. So I think all professors at Center end up being first year advisors at some point. So we have this system where everybody does that. Usually it's every other year. So we don't have them constantly, because you give them your full attention for 2 years. So I've done that a bunch of times now. And on day one, when I get students into my office or when we meet as a group, I start asking them about do they know what their goals are? Because I would say most students don't, or a lot don't. So that's the first thing I ask is sort of like, what are your goals? Do you know what they are? If you don't, I'm always like, it's okay, we'll figure it out. And I just start feeling them out on that process. Some are I've had students come in and say they're super committed, right? I want to be a physical therapist, or I want to be a pre-med. And so I try and facilitate that as much as possible, help them along with their already identified goals. But I also have had students who are really trying to figure it out. And so that, I think, is where center is really wonderful. I thought I wanted to be an engineer and I had to declare before I went to college, right? Before I even hit campus, I had to declare I was an engineer. And so it took me 2 years to figure out I didn't want to do that. I don't want that to happen to my students. So instead, I try to encourage them to explore a variety of courses. I find out what kind of maybe extracurriculars they were interested in and what are the things that really move them. And based on that, recommend some courses. And then that's just kind of this ongoing conversation over the first year, usually. I find that by the end of the first year, students at least they've taken at least 8 to 9 courses, and they have a better sense of, okay, I really liked this. I thought religion was going to be, religion is kind of one of these things where like students don't know what that is in college, because it's not, I believe in X religion. It's, studying religion as text or as a belief system. So it's a really different kind of experience. And so I think when students go through that, and even, history is really different in college than it was, say, in high school. It's fascinating, by the way. If I had studied something else, it would be history for sure. So I guess I just have them experience as much as they can in that first year. And then that's just a set of conversations where we get to kind of identify or narrow down, okay, this worked out, this didn't work out. Yeah. So it's really an ongoing conversation, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the beauty of a small community is you get to know people well enough to where you can have the hard conversations that may need to happen. You can have the soothing conversations, the informative conversations, and you get to know students well enough to know what they need at that time to help them grow and develop as an individual.
Absolutely. And I'm just remembering another story that happened. I had a student so my group of first years they did just declare in the spring. And one of my students was very unsure of what he wanted. And I think he thought he wanted one thing his first year, and then kind of took him a little while. He ended up taking a physics class and really loved it. But he felt like, oh gosh, is it too late? Is it too late to become a physics major at this point? So I just called someone in the physics department and said, I think it was Bruce Rodenborn. And I said, Bruce, I have this student. I don't know anything about majoring in physics. Can I send him over to your office? And can you figure out with him how he can make this work? Because I think he really wants to be a physics major, but he's unsure if he can make it work. And Bruce said, sure, send him right over, And so that's another thing that I just feel is there's sort of two pieces to that. One, you could still not know in your sophomore year and figure it out. It's still possible. And two, there's someone who's going to help you do that, right?
Absolutely.
That was not something I had as an undergrad. I mean, Carnegie Mellon was a great institution, brilliant professors, brilliant students, highly competitive and elite, but I didn't have that personal touch. I had to really do a lot of figuring it out on my own.
What was undergraduate Jen Goetz like?
Calculating. I always tell my students this. They come to me and they're stressed out, and I'm like, well, you don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
I would calculate my grades, so I knew how hard I had to work. On the final, like, oh, that A is already in the bag, or that B is already in the bag, or whatever it was. So I was like that. But then I think also in the beginning, gosh, okay, here's something I always tell my students. When I remember my first day of college, I was a girl in an engineering school. So obviously I felt like I didn't belong already. And I remember my first day of Calc 1. The professor, there were, I think, 300 people in this class. And I remember the professor said, how many of you have taken calculus before, like AP calculus? And it felt like everyone in the room except me raised their hand. And he said, well, so you all know this already. We're going to move pretty quickly.
Oh.
And so day one in college, I felt like, whoa, I'm already behind.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a terrible feeling. So that was sort of my first year or two. I did okay, but I didn't do great. I had my fair share of C's for sure. And then I had a couple epiphanies maybe through internships. Those are super helpful. And I realized, I think I'm trying to be an engineer because other people think I should be an engineer. Mm-hmm. And that was when I started to see kind of what really interested me. And I had a couple really amazing professors who taught psychology and statistics. And that was when I'm good at math, so I was still able to take that with me. And when I switched, that was when it started to really feel like something I wanted to do, if that makes sense. Like, this is really what excited me. I still was a little calculating and, because I think you're asked to do so much in college. Well, first you have 4 classes, but then you have extracurriculars and your social life and family. There's so much pulling on you that you can't be perfect at everything. And so I do think it's important to recognize, well, what's really important to me, and then put your energy there. And then you may realize, if that's really important to me and I'm putting my energy towards, this club or this class, then maybe another class or another club cannot be where I put my time. So, yeah. Also, I was still confused when I graduated college. I did not like my second major. Well, I liked the major. I didn't like the jobs that were in front of me. And I had never gotten to study abroad in undergrad. So that was when I went to the Peace Corps. It was sort of my escape button. And I applied to the Peace Corps my senior year of college, and then went straight to West Africa for 2 years. So I was a little confused in undergrad.
It's almost like you read my mind, though, because I am intrigued about sort of how you think your time in the Peace Corps influenced you, and knowing the emphasis we have here on study abroad, kind of the advice or maybe the growth you're seeing from our students that are taking advantage of that and expanding their horizons, their knowledge, their comfort level. How would you tie all that together?
Gosh, study abroad is so amazing. And I think I maybe knew at that point that I hadn't gotten to do it in college and I still wanted something. So Peace Corps was as close as I could get. I think that when I was in the Peace Corps and I lived in a small village in West Africa, it was sort of the prototypical Peace Corps experience. There was no electricity, no running water. I literally lived in a mud hut. And my life went from being incredibly structured to incredibly unstructured. And that was the first time in my life that had occurred, and I think that's probably true for a lot of my students, that their life up until this point and then through college is very, very structured. People are telling you what to do or at least setting those things out in front of you. And so I felt like that was where I really grew up and started to be able to have a sense of myself. And I think that is something I want my students to have. Maybe not the mud hut, but I want them to have that feeling of being someplace completely different, where you don't know the rules, where you have to figure it out and be a little independent, but at the same time ask for help, if that makes sense. You kind of have both of those are happening. And gosh, when I see students come back, either my advisees or just I can tell by students in my classroom, I bet you I could guess. I haven't tested it, but I bet you I could guess who has studied abroad and who hasn't. Not to say not studying abroad is a problem, but you just see another level of confidence and another level of I'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a strength that I really love. And then the other thing, of course, is not just about yourself, but about understanding the world. And so really being able to see that there are valid, important other ways of valuing and being in the world. And that's what you see when you study abroad, is and the longer you study abroad, I think the more sort of deeply that hits you. You get to really see what it's like in this other space with a different set of meanings. I always encourage my students to study abroad if they can, for a long term. I think that that's great. And if for some reason it can't happen, or the place they want to, we only have access to so many places for the long term. So that's where the center term abroad is really fantastic. And I haven't yet taken my own study abroad by myself, but I've helped Dr. John Earl. So he has done research in Uganda, and a few years ago, he was kind of looking for a second, and I was like, me, I want to go. And so the first time we went to Uganda and Rwanda. And granted, Uganda, Rwanda, so different from West Africa and Niger, right? Worlds apart. And yet the skill set I had really, it did translate. And there were things that I was able to really bring to the table. And that was just such a wonderful experience. I mean, that is the most amazing. All the study abroads are amazing, but that one is really amazing. The students get to spend almost a full week in a homestay in a village, in a mud hut. So it's pretty fantastic. And so I've done that again. And then hoping to take students to Bhutan for a center term trip. And that'll be my first time I'll get there beforehand, but that'll be my first time to Bhutan, and we have amazing partners there. So study abroad is amazing. I think it's one of those things, it's so challenging, so difficult, but students, gosh, they get so transformed.
My oldest spent the winter this past year in Finland, which was really amazing. And to hear him sort of recount what he has recognized in himself as growth is really a rewarding moment for sure.
Yeah.
When you talked earlier about your undergraduate experience and how there is this need to figure out how do you balance everything. You've got your classes, you've got things you want to do, you have to learn how to say no. And for some students, that's a whole new experience. What do you as a faculty member see as the benefits of our residential community and how students are able to balance music, drama, athletics, and academics? What do you think is beneficial? What's your observation as a faculty member?
Well, one thing that I think is really beneficial from the perspective of faculty, I think something like 50% of my students are varsity athletes. And so the first thing I see is that I know the coaches, or I can call the coaches, and we have a really tight connection. So that works both. I don't know if the students always like that, because sometimes I call up a coach and say, so-and-so, needs to get his act together or something like that. So we're getting at them from all angles. But I do think that means that for the most part, faculty understand better what's going on in the athletic realm, so to speak. And then I think the coaches here understand this is an academic institution and the students are here for an education, and athletics are important, but they play, they're not first, right? And I think that that's important. In terms of, in some ways, I do think students struggle a lot with balance. And I don't think that's specific to center. I think that's true everywhere. But I do think that center, there's a lot of opportunity. You have really great classes and professors you can work with and do research with. You have amazing clubs and organizations that do great work in the community. And then there's athletics and other things, right? So I think that's something that all students struggle with, but I do see students go through that here. It's certainly something that I have as a conversation with my advisees, but again, I think maybe because I also was an athlete in college, so I really understand that perspective. And then I also participated in clubs and stuff. And I know that a lot of my best experiences came outside the classroom. And so I certainly would never tell a student, like, don't play a sport, or don't be in this club or something like that, or don't be in student government, or don't be in the play, or, because I think that you get huge skill sets from that. And in a way that you can't get in a classroom. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, and I think you did touch on a really important part. I think there are conversations and there are people helping students sort through what is the healthy balance.
Absolutely.
I know our resident assistants do that. The student life office is reinforcing that, and I guess really reaffirming the fact that you can say no to something, because a lot of students haven't done that in their personal commitments up to that point. So I think, and you don't have to say no for forever. You can say no as a first year, and you can get your footing. You learn more about your time management. You learn more about your organizational skills, your study habits, how to really, more than anything, just budget your time. And then add in as you go. I'm often really, really impressed with seniors who come to me and they're like, I'm applying for a job. Will you write me a letter of recommendation? And I'll ask for an updated resume, because I know some things, but I don't know everything. And I'm sitting there looking at it thinking, when do you sleep? So you can, again, it's that gaining independence, taking ownership over decision making, that kind of thing. But I think you really touched on it, though, that I think there are lots of conversations in different realms. Student life, I still have conversations with students that I help through the admission process. They're getting that reinforced when they come to your office, and I'm sure getting that reinforced when they go to career development.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And let me add one other thing is, I know that this is supposed to be about sort of like, what do professors do for the students, or what does center do? But I think that kind of some of the magic of this too is the other students. So what I have seen is, if I have a first year who's struggling, and say they are on athletic team, their teammates step in and start helping them, saying, okay, here's how you do it. You got to study this way. Okay, that professor, here's what I know about their exams, right? So, and I mean that in the best of ways, that it's a passing down of skill sets and knowledge. They've been through it. And so I think they do that really well. And I see that outside of athletics. So I see that in DSU. I see that in students who are in different theater productions, right? They know what it's like to have been through that, and they've learned to thrive. And I really see them passing that information down. And I think that's really important when you're in a place where everyone wants to succeed, that they're also going to help you succeed.
Yeah, I think there is very much a cooperative spirit, and I think that kind of spills over from faculty, staff, administration, students, helping other students. And I think that it ties it all together in a way that I think really enhances our community, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're from the East Coast, and you find this college in Central Kentucky for a new professional endeavor. What's your impression of Danville? What do you think about Danville?
Yeah, so I live in Danville. I should say that. This home that you're seeing is in Danville. I love Danville. Granted, I'm middle-aged, so my life is quieter. But what I love about Danville, so I'll say this, before I came here, I grew up in suburban New Jersey, which was very walkable. I spent my childhood taking the train into New York City before I even got a driver's license, and my friends and I would just walk around New York City. Then I moved to California, lived in Berkeley, which is just outside of San Francisco, and didn't have a car there, just got by on public transport and things like that. And lived other places too. But I guess what I think is really interesting is Danville, most of my life is like a couple square miles. I live about 1.5 miles from campus. I walk in the morning, stop and get a coffee. And that's what my life was like in Berkeley. And I was in a big city. I lived about 1 mile from campus. I would walk, and get my coffee and go into the office. So there's a big difference between Danville and Berkeley, obviously, but some things are really similar. And then the other thing that is amazingly similar, I don't know if I should bring this up, is political activism, is a big deal here. And for the first time, when I lived in Berkeley, did I feel like my vote or my voice really mattered? No, there were millions of other people who were louder than me, right? And in Danville, I have gone to town meetings and I have gotten involved in protests on campus and off campus in a way that really I hadn't before. And that has a lot to do with my students and a lot to do with other faculty. So I don't know if I'm supposed to bring that up, but it's a surprisingly active place, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I grew up near a mid-range city. I grew up near Cincinnati and have come to kind of cherish the small town vibe. But a lot of that is because of, again, the nice town gown relations, that kind of thing, for sure. So, so you mentioned other professors, and I have a question. You might need to think for a minute on this, but do you have a professional center colleague that you wish had taught you as an undergrad?
Ooh. Well, I've taken other people's classes.
Okay.
So I really want to eventually, we'll see if this ever happens. I would love to. So because I lived in West Africa and I actually speak French, or terribly, not great. And so I've sat in on French classes. I've sat in on, I also do research in China. So I've taken Chinese classes at Center. And that's been super fun. Like learning languages is so great. I feel like I've taken John Earl's classes, his history classes, since I've been his co-teacher for these Uganda trips, and that has been incredible. I mean, he is, I don't know if you've heard students, but he's pretty dynamic and amazing, and he teaches African history and African film, and he's incredible. But there's other people too. I mean, like, you know, given that I have kind of a science background, I feel like there are some scientists. I don't know what I would do with chemistry, but I'm tempted to go back and take, you know, some chemistry courses. That would be real fun. But then I also want to take religion. I mean, I don't know. It's tough. I'm a professor, so like we love studying and learning. So it's hard to nail down. But yeah.
Yeah, I think about this a lot only because, you know, I graduated from Center. It's been years ago. I was a psychology major at Center, by the way.
Really? I didn't know.
Right. And I sit here and think how much I would have loved to have sat in your classroom and to done research with you. And there's so many faculty members that have this energy, and they have this spark, and it's I had a lot of professors like that when I was here, but not that I feel cheated, but I'm envious of the students and the experiences they're having now, and wish I had more time to audit classes. I'm glad you're doing it. I'm not in a position yet to do it, but maybe one day.
It's tough. It's tough to fit in. I'm not a good student. You know, I attend a couple times a week. I don't always do my homework, but I'm enthusiastic, so they appreciate it, I think.
A lifelong learner.
For sure.
Let's see, I've got a couple more questions, and we'll take some questions from our participants. So what would be a fun fact about you, or something interesting that your students don't know about you? Any hidden talents?
No, I'm actually really untalented. But I can tell you what I told my posse. I went to high school in New Jersey, and I actually have proof sitting underneath my computer. It's holding up my computer. My yearbook from my graduating class. I went to school with Lauryn Hill.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's my fun fact.
Okay.
It's not really about me.
Well, you know, 6 degrees of separation, right? So now we have to get famous a little bit.
Right. Oh, and I guess, I mean, it's not so much a fun fact, but like, because I lived in Niger, I speak Zarma, which is not a language that most people have even ever heard of. And I used to speak it pretty fluently.
Very cool. That's not in my wheelhouse. So very cool. Where is your favorite place on campus?
Well, there's a bench out back of Young Hall that's under a tree. And I often like to go out there because I spend a lot of time in the science building. and my classes are in the building, my office is in the building, and I discover sometimes that I, haven't seen daylight. so I'll often go out to, there's a bench out back of Young, and what I like about that is people are constantly walking by, and I end up just in rant, because it's kind of, a lot of people walk by there, I don't know. So I end up in a lot of conversations with faculty, staff, students, and it's just a nice break.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We often will ask students this question when we do panels, and it's one of my favorite questions because it gives you a little more insight into sort of what some of the priorities are and where people feel most comfortable. And I love the dining hall because I feel like I get to see students, and that's where I get a chance to reconnect, even if it's just to say hello. But usually there's an opportunity to have at least a short conversation to kind of get updated or caught up with somebody. And so that allows us to remain pretty connected during the 4 years that they're here.
That also shows me what an extrovert you are, Pam, which I knew anyway, but
yeah,
it's a classic personality test. I was like, I like a place where I'm mostly alone.
Yeah, no, I like to be down in the energy and the buzz and the hum. So as you think about sort of what you've learned during your tenure at Center, what advice would you offer an incoming student?
Oh.
About maybe general preparation, that kind of thing? I know we talked about some advising things, but what kind of wisdom would you offer an incoming student?
And I think I'm a professor, so I'm thinking about this perspective. I think I would really encourage you to, Center provides the opportunity to get to know your professors as people. I've had students over to dinner. I've had students, I've met their families and their parents in China. I do research in China. I've had dinner with families in China. So I think, but if students don't walk in my door, that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that a lot of students feel nervous, that they don't know what to say, or they feel like they're wasting time, or what do you say to a professor? I think maybe it's intimidation or respect. But I think that for the most part, we really want to get to know our students, and that can't happen. It can kind of happen in the classroom, but it has to happen in other spaces. And so I think if my students take advantage of that, it happens. And so I would say that that's probably one of the reasons why you're coming to Center, and to take advantage of that as much as possible. And you may not connect with every single professor, but there's going to be probably 3, 4, a handful of professors that you really connect with, and they really care about you. So I think if they can start that early, don't come in and just assume no one's interested, because we are interested.
My oldest son, a newly minted Center alum, would echo that strongly. And when you were talking about majors and minors and sort of that process, I have the two spectrums. So my oldest had an econ class, fall term, first year, decided that moment, this is my field, I love it, and then looked back. And then I have this rising sophomore who is going through trial and error. I like that. I think I like that. Well, maybe that's not what I thought. I'm still interested in this. So I think they're going to just go through very different pathways. Sure. The one consistent element is that both of them have been getting and continue to get very genuine, authentic interest from their professors. And I think that's been, that was the experience I had as a Center alum. So as a parent, to look back now and see that has remained very much the same. And that's really kind of a rooted value here, I think, is really at the foundation of what we do. And I think most of what you've talked about today really reinforces that for me. Your students are awfully lucky to have you invested in their.
I'm lucky. This is like the best job ever.
Well, I do. I think they're just, they're lucky to have somebody who takes such care and interest in their growth, not just as a student and a scholar, but as an individual. And I think that residential experience really allows that approach to where it's not just about being a good student, it's about being a good citizen, a good leader, a good community member. And I think, like you said, that happens inside the classroom and outside the classroom.
For sure, for sure.
Is there anything that you were hoping I would ask about today that I didn't?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I feel like we covered good ground. I'm looking at the chat function, and folks are welcome to submit questions if you have anything that you're curious about. And we'll give a minute for that. We may have covered enough ground to keep people pretty well informed, but we welcome any questions. So you've been our experimental faculty member today. So you're the first one out of the gate for this. So
good. So if we messed anything up, it's beginner. It's just because we're beginners.
No, I think you're setting a very high bar. So. We have a nice comment from Cindy saying that you guys did great. So Cindy's going to be joining us in the fall, and we're excited to have her join the student body for sure. So
yeah.
Great.
Well, I'm really excited that I will get to meet students in the fall. And I think that I have some students I know who maybe are a little concerned, based on their own health and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking about how I'm going to both have students in the classroom and how I'm going to be trying to reach those students that maybe can't come. And I think that's a new challenge. I think before we started recording, you and I started talking about, although we all want to be in the classroom, there have been some positives to come out of this. I think that we have to be creative. We have to be responsive to the challenges. And I think that a lot of professors are going to really rise to that challenge. I think it's causing us to think of new ways of doing things. And it's not all bad,
I would agree. And I do think whether you're on class or on campus in class, or if you are in a remote setting, if people genuinely care about you, it's going to be a more enriching experience.
Oh, for sure.
So I feel confident that we've learned a lot from the spring, and if we're in a position to have hybrid experiences, that our faculty are amazingly smart and brilliant people, and they're going to continue to learn how to do things in an innovative and really engaging way. So let's see, another question. Will there be any future collaborations with other departments that you're looking forward to?
Is that question for you, Pam, or for me?
Well, I think we can talk a little bit about the first year curriculum for students. We'll incorporate some more interdisciplinary work.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that's going to be a joint effort. There's a lot of joint work going on right now trying to figure out how we give students a really good experience in the next few months. I'm working with the advising group to be a first year experience instructor. So, I'm from the admission office, so I'm gonna rely on my good colleagues in the faculty to school me and help me learn how to be a best practice instructor. So, so there are gonna be some new endeavors. We'll learn a lot more, I'd say, in the next coming months about collaboration. And we, of course, are in the middle of, or at the end, really, of John Roush's tenure with Center, and we'll be welcoming a new president in the fall. So we'll have a new era ushered in, I should say, and so that'll be good. Also, we do have the CenterWorks program, and that would be very much a collaborative endeavor. So I would definitely read more about that online. We're really excited about kind of how we're gonna implement and really highlight and allow students to tap into their entrepreneurial mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of academic departments, there's certainly a lot of collaboration that happens informally and then more formally. So faculty often come into each other's courses. I've done things with other professors where So for example, I'm trying to remember which professor did this, but a bunch of us study race and prejudice, and they brought in 5 different professors to their class to have a conversation about the way our different departments or the way our different disciplines study this topic. And we've done that with other things too. So, so that's one sort of informal way. And then there's professors do all kinds of interdisciplinary teaching also. So I know, you know, we have I think as a physicist and a philosopher are teaching linked courses. We call them linked courses, where the students enroll in both. And then they're looking at concepts of space and time from both a philosophical and a physical, I don't know what the word would be, from the physics perspective. So they're kind of looking at the hard science of it and then the more philosophical component, and they actually intersect in really fascinating ways. So, yeah.
And I do think the joint center term programs, we have a number of those. And I think that's a really good experience for a student, because they may be going initially because they're very connected to one professor who's going, but by virtue of being accompanied by another professor, they might develop an interest in that academic discipline, or just really kind of establish a relationship with that professor as well. So I think there's a fair amount of that. We're a pretty, as we mentioned before, a collaborative place. We don't necessarily have, well, I have been told this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jen. I know you spent a lot of time in the science building, but our faculty members are often put in spaces where it's not just all discipline oriented or departmental. I know Crounce has a lot of different academic offices that house different, you know, disciplines and different.
Right, they're all interspersed.
Right. So, so we're not very segmented, I think, or try not to be. So,
some of my best friends are classicists and anthropologists and sociologists. So, not scientists. I mean, I like the scientists, but
yeah. So great. All right. Anything else? Excellent. Well, Jen, I really appreciate your time today. And like I said, we often don't get to, you know, visit as much. Just we all get in our pockets of work and so forth. And so this has been really a treat for me today. And I thank you for your time and all the insight that you shared with us. I look forward to seeing what sort of unfolds in the fall. And thank you for all of the good work that you'll do in preparation for that, for sure.
Thanks. It's been really fun. I hope it's been helpful.
Yeah, and we are recording this, so people will have access to it, and we welcome any follow-up questions. Happy to help anybody as you kind of ruminate on what we discussed today. So, great. Thank you.